Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, June 17th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Lot to get to. Quickly, I guess, because the headline this morning is that Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved the war cabinet. Let's explain a little bit what that was. He had to, actually, since one of the three members of the troika that made up the inner war cabinet quit the government. So, that would mean that the war cabinet would have been two people, which is kind of obviates the point, which is to have a odd number. So if you have a vote, the vote prevails. He is also doing so because he has a problem on his far right flank where his two most right-wing ministers, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, want in on the war cabinet. So his way of dealing with their demand is to dissolve the war cabinet and just say that the general cabinet will meet more frequently. Our friend Jonathan Schanzer is very troubled by this development. He thinks that it's an indication of a lack of strategic direction shown by Bibi about how Israel is going to bring the war in Rafah to a successful conclusion and then move on to the north and to deal with Hezbollah. This all comes as Israel has suffered its most grievous losses in the course of the war, with some successful countermeasures being taken by Hamas against Israeli forces in Rafah. And all this indicates, again, that the American policy that Israel found itself sort of forced to follow in slowing down its war against Hamas, 4 months ago, is having deleterious consequences today, making the strategic position of Israel in Rafah worse because it has given Hamas time to come up with a battle plan to fight against Israel's invasion. So that's the general. That's that just setting the table.
There was also the pause. Israel announced
yesterday, right? Yes,
Israel announced that there will be a daily pause in Rafah, particular around a road in Rafah that allows the humanitarian convoys, the trucks, to enter this part of the city. For about 8 hours a day, there won't be fighting around that area. And this is to appease the international community who are always demanding continued aid. What was interesting about the reports about this pause is that the reporters on the ground from NPR, as I drove into work this morning, were admitting...
You didn't.
I did. I have to. This is my show prep. They were admitting that once the food crosses, it's anyone's guess where it ends up. Anyone's guess. The humanitarian convoys themselves were saying, well, we cross, and then we're looted or shot at or we're hijacked, and the food disappears. So the cover story is it's too soon to tell how effective this new policy will be of the humanitarian pause in this one area of Rafah. But it's obvious that it will have the same consequences every other attempt to supply humanitarian aid to the Palestinians living in Gaza. And that result is Hamas steals it all and carries it underground to feed its troops and its leadership.
Another detail that emerged over the weekend is you may remember that 2 or 3 months ago, the NGO world from the UN onward was claiming that Gaza was on the verge of a massive famine, and that the famine-like conditions were what occasioned the need, this focus on aid trucks not getting through, and aid trucks had to be gotten through, and all of that. Apparently, there has not been a single death from starvation in Gaza recorded by the legendary health ministry. This is getting to be a little like maybe I've used this analogy before, the Dennis Moore sketch on Monty Python's Flying Circus, where Dennis Moore is a Robin Hood-like figure played by John Cleese. So Dennis Moore riding through the land, he robs from the rich and gives to the poor. Dennis Moore, so he starts robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, and he keeps going and he keeps going and he keeps going. And by the time the half hour is over and you keep cutting back to Dennis Moore, all of the rich people are poor and all of the poor people are rich. And they keep complaining that they don't have enough silverware or they don't have enough tankards for their ale or something like that. And the song, which had gone Dennis Moore, riding through the land, he robs from the rich and gives to the poor. Dennis Moore turns into he robs from the poor and gives to the rich. Stupid bitch. Dennis Moore. So there is more aid going into Gaza. Hundreds of tons of aid goes into Gaza and will now go into Gaza on a daily basis. Much of it, not all of it.
It's also like the postal. It's by air, by sea, by land,
but not by pier.
Not by pier. When the pier works. When the pier works.
Well, again, the pier is being dismantled again because rough waters could tear it apart once again.
So the Army Corps of Engineers is one of the most remarkable organizations the world has ever seen, right? Was begun really in the Civil War to create logistical opportunities for the Union Army and then the armies in future to do things that armies could never do. Like how do you get things across rivers? How do you get things across, when bridges are blown up, how do you rebuild them? The stories of the Army Corps of Engineer are just legend and they're astonishing. And they, D-Day, all kinds of stuff like that, right? So apparently Biden says build a pier, and this is a rare moment in the history of our engineering genius in terms of warfighting that nobody said we better make sure that it can deal with waves.
Well, we don't know. This is also a story of we don't.
I'm not blaming the Army Corps of Engineers.
Our reporters are so are so credulous about anything involving Biden, much less anything involving the Palestinians, that they're probably not looking into what happened. But I don't think the problem is the pier. The problem is the location of the pier and these waters where it's located for political reasons seem to be incredibly choppy. So I imagine that if you had an actual investigative reporter looking into this, there probably were people saying, hey, maybe we need to move the pier elsewhere, because it's simply political. It was simply a sop. And a friend of mine pointed out that when Biden made the pledge at the State of the Union, he probably didn't think that the war would be going on to actually require the pier. So it was come to a total kind of pie in the sky promise. Since the war has continued, the Army Corps of Engineers came up with something, but it clearly has not worked because it's now, I believe, the third time the pier has broken apart and only to be reconstituted once again. I do want to add one thing. I know I beat up on NPR all the time. I also would like to spend a moment beating up on the Washington Post this morning. Because over the weekend, I was treated to a lead article.
Mondays. I love Mondays with Maggie.
It's like the anger character in Inside Out. I kind of boil for the weekend and let it out on Monday morning. I was treated to a lead article in the Washington Post this weekend about how the Palestinians living in Gaza, it's hot. It's hot there. And on top of everything, they have to deal with the heat. Can you? Oh my! It's awful.
It's really hot. But I was under the impression that it was an open air prison before October 7th. So I assume that there's no air conditioning in an open air prison 25 miles wide and 8
I just feel like all the things that they've been telling us about what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, heat. Now we're at heat. I mean, you have the bogus charges of famine. You have the bogus charges of Israel just mowing down civilian casualties. You have the blood libel that's been committed against the Jews by accusing them of genocide. And now we've gone to the traffic. Remember there were
A lot of traffic.
There was traffic when they had to leave. Remember, you couldn't leave Rafah. That was the thing. How can you imagine that we're going to evacuate this entire city so that the IDF can come in and try to fight Hamas? And sure enough, the city was evacuated. But then you heard the complaints about the traffic, and now it's hot. So I feel like we're kind of defining the complaints down to the point where, I don't.
Well, and meanwhile, 5,000 rockets are being rained down on Israeli citizens by Hezbollah, and
Right.
we've sent an envoy there this week again to try to deal with that situation, which is it's escalating, and that's not covered by the Washington Post. Doesn't really. They like to downplay the impact on Israeli civilians.
Oh, no.
of
It's
these
okay.
rockets.
It's okay, Christine, because I have very good news. I think this will really cheer you up. American
Oh, no.
envoy Amos Hochstein
He's going back.
is going back to the
Yes.
region,
Yes.
and he is going to
The Willy Wonka of
sprinkle
diplomacy,
magic
yes.
fairy dust at the Lebanese border in order to calm things between Israel and Hezbollah. Because, down in the south, Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, their work
Oh, amazing.
at securing a ceasefire, I think, has really allowed the Biden people to build on success after success, so they can just turn north. And I think we're in really, really good hands, kind of like the hands that Joe Biden was in on the stage the other night with Jimmy Kimmel and Barack Obama, when it was time for Joe Biden to leave the stage, and he wasn't leaving the stage.
Huge
And
metaphor
then-
there, by the way, for our
And
politics.
then Nanny Obama kind of grabbed his hand and led him shuffling off to the side. Now, Abe, very important moment here we need to discuss. Our friend Mark Halperin, in his morning newsletter, which is indispensable but very expensive. So, Mark, you are doing a great job, but it's hard to recommend it because most people can't afford it. Anyway, Mark links to a rebuttal video. The video that everyone saw yesterday, which is of Obama sort of tapping Joe on the hand, kind of leading him off the stage. Mark says this is a must-see video because it suggests that the video that we saw does not tell the story right, and that it's misleading. So we watched it together just before we hit the air. And Abe, what did we see around second 30 of the video that supposedly is the corrective to the Obama's leading Biden off the stage? The way Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister, had to lead Biden back into the meeting of the leaders there on the hillside last week.
The video that's supposed to be the corrective video, and that is supposedly shot by an attendee at the event, at the point John mentions, shows a cut, a big cut, and a change in perspective, and the action has proceeded to another place. Biden and Obama are sort of walking off stage suddenly, happily, without any seeming assistance on Obama's part.
Yeah, sort of like imagine the wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl 20 years ago, whenever that was, when
20
Janet
years ago.
Jackson.
Justin Timberlake exposed Jennifer Lopez's
Janet Jackson.
No,
Janet
Janet Jackson.
Jackson's. I apologize, Jennifer Lopez. So at second 30 of this 42-second video, they're waving. Biden's waving. Jimmy Kimmel is standing there being quizzling. It's amazing, by the way, that Kimmel, Fallon, and Colbert are all doing fundraisers for Biden, given the fact that none of them has an audience larger than Greg Gutfeld's. But we will pull that to one side. Nonetheless, Jimmy Kimmel on stage next to Obama next to. Okay, so if you see the video that started it, The video that started this whole thing. It's continuous, right? They're standing there. Biden kind of freezes in place. Obama taps him, kind of grab, and they go off. In this thing, 42 seconds, 30 seconds in, they're standing there. Biden's waving all this, and then suddenly you're 100 rows back, and you see the proscenium of the stage where it's happening for about 4 seconds, and then you cut back, and Biden and Obama are already walking off stage. So the 4 seconds that are the key to the, oh my God, that Democrats better find somebody else to run for president before November, or this something, this is the end of everything, are conveniently avoided. You don't see them. So not only is this not a corrective video, it only makes it worse. Or worse, because it's clearly an effort to deceive people.
I'm spooked enough by technology now that, I wouldn't swear that the original video that shows Biden freezing and Obama nudging him and sort of leading him off stage hasn't been tampered with. I am not in a position to be able to demonstrate that. But as just a layperson looking at this, the common sense conclusion is that the first one is real and that the second one is
and you can tell because
is an edited cover-up. Yeah.
This is exactly how he's been behaving in many public outings recently. So there's a consistency across the board. And the fact that the many people in the mainstream media rush to throw out a doctored video with many, many cuts and an insistence that you don't believe your lying eyes yet again, I think actually, to John's point, that it makes it worse. They should have just let it be. But the rush to defend Biden's acuity and vigor every time one of these videos appears is not going to help the Biden campaign.
And the rush, I think, is fairly new. I mean, as you say, Christine, it's not just this one video. It's what we call a fact pattern that's been established over now several years of Biden just kind of declining in his capacities. And we've seen reports on this in the Wall Street Journal blockbuster report. We saw a Daily Mail report coming out of the G8 meeting, too, where there was just investigative reporting and anecdotal reporting based on what happened, plus the videos from the G8. And the Normandy celebration, commemoration, plus this latest thing. I mean, it's hard to deny. What's fascinating is we've now moved to part of the media echoing the Biden campaign's spin. And it's really the Biden campaign that is behind all this, saying, look, these videos are doctored, or no, look, we all agree that Biden, sometimes things can be taken out of context, and that's why people think that there's something wrong with him. The latest argument is that, well, Trump's old too. This is another funny thing that I've seen a few reports about. Do you know that Trump will be the oldest president ever if he wins? Think about that.
Yeah, but when?
Well, exactly. We have the oldest president now. We have the oldest president now. But I've seen 4 articles in the past week saying, well, if Trump wins, he'll be the oldest president ever inaugurated.
Okay.
To his first term. Please give me a break.
Big mistake this weekend. What was his big mistake this weekend? This is really the thing where you can say,
you mean
anybody could have. But anybody could have made this mistake.
Dr. Ronnie.
He referred to Dr. Ronnie Jackson as Dr. Ronnie Johnson. Now, Jackson Johnson? I mean, how many sportscasters have made that mistake?
But his real name is not Dr. Ronnie Johnson. It's Dr. Ronnie. You don't need the last name because Trump gave him the new name. His new name is Dr. Ronnie. So it doesn't matter what he calls him with his surname.
Well, so also Andrew Ross Sorkin of DealBook went on and said Trump had this meeting with CEOs and rich billionaires, and he didn't make sense. And some people reported to Andrew Ross Sorkin that Trump didn't make sense, and he was meandering, and he was hard to follow, and he was meandering. So, really? Trump meandering?
Guy gives
3 hours.
He's usually so razor sharp on message. Yes.
The man meander is like would be his name if he were a Shakespeare character. His name would be Meander. Like, so I don't know. Talk to Andrew Ross Sorkin. This is a pretty lame game to be
I'll tell you who talked to
this
Andrew
late
Ross
date.
Sorkin, the
Yeah.
liberal CEOs who
Yeah,
were at the
right,
Business
I know.
Roundtable.
I know.
And then
I-
the conservative CEOs went to Fox and went to
Yeah.
the New York Post and said, oh, actually, the business community is very excited to have Trump back in office. So it's we're now entering the phase of the campaign where you really can't take anything at face value,
Right.
because it's getting real. We have the debate next week. We have the conventions
believe it.
coming up next month. Trump is going to have to pick a VP. This is getting real, and I think the desperation of the Biden people is becoming apparent in the weird spin that they're generating around his age. Oh no, Trump will be the oldest president. I mean, that's so insane to make that an argument.
I think that now you have a very interesting dynamic. You're calling it desperation, but if you look at it, it's. I'm really not. My son's a chess player. I'm not a chess player, but I in a game like chess, right? Much of what you do when you play chess is the counter, right? So somebody moves, and you have to move a piece that will interrupt their strategy, or at least cause them to think about going in another direction. Let's say so. Biden's problem is age. It's biting. The public is accepting it. So you go for an age strategy with Trump, not because that's the way you're going to beat Trump, but to do something to neutralize the age problem for Biden by giving Biden people, when they go to the 4th of July picnic, an opportunity when they're talking to their family to say, oh, you think Biden? So did you see Trump couldn't even remember his own doctor's name? He couldn't remember his own doctor's name. So don't come to me and say, I can't vote for Biden when Trump can't remember his own doctor's name. It's not a dumb strategy. It can't be the only
because Biden
strategy.
couldn't remember when he was vice president. When David Hur was in interviewing him, he couldn't remember the years he was actually vice president. That's a little more concerning, I think.
But I'm just saying you can't have it. You can't just counter the successful assaults of the other side. Like, that's prevent defense. And in the end, you have to have an offense. And their offense, which was Trump as a criminal, doesn't seem to be working.
Well, so this is a new ad that the Biden campaign has spent a lot of money on recently, pointing out the conviction and talking about Donald Trump and what a bad person he is and all the awful things he said and how can he be an example for the children. And the problem with this ad is it's the same ad that's been run against Donald Trump for, 9 years now, since 2015. Same, and it's never worked. And one take I have on the Biden campaign is it's increasingly resembling the Hillary campaign of 2016, where the Hillary campaign thought all we need to do to win is show people what an awful person Donald Trump is. We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to come up with an agenda that is suited to the times. We don't have to recognize the economic struggles of many Americans. We just need to remind people how awful Donald Trump is. That increasingly seems to be the Biden administration's entire strategy. And they've spent tens of millions of dollars on these television ads going back months, either promoting Biden, positive ads, or negative ads based on Trump's character, saying nothing about what's actually happening in the country. And it's not working. I don't expect it to either, because it didn't work for Hillary.
That said, when you look at the head-to-heads on unfavorability, how do people feel about both candidates? They're pretty close. They are equally favorable and unfavorable, right? So they're both at about close to 60% unfavorable. And so with that in mind, you can't say that the Biden people don't have. I mean, this sounds ridiculous because he's the incumbent and everything, that they don't have a shot of reminding people what it was that they didn't like about Donald Trump that caused him to lose.
I get it, but they were not that close in 2020,
Right,
and that was
they weren't,
Biden's. That was Biden's ace in the hole, was that people actually viewed him pretty favorably. That's no longer the case. So they're back where they were in 2016, where both candidates were viewed unfavorably. And now in 2024, we have like record unfavorability toward both candidates.
Well, and they're running, and they
yeah.
haven't changed the Biden administration weirdly hasn't changed its campaign strategy. They're running a 2016 Hillary campaign. They literally had Hillary in her glamorous moo phase come out and during the Tony Awards and make an election year pitch, which is not really, wasn't totally well received, but he's running this, he's raising all the money with all the celebrities. He's doing the playbook. And I think that's a huge mistake, because if he bungles in this first debate, they're going to have to switch their focus. I mean, we saw, John, you sent around, I mean, there's some older voters who are coming back to Biden, but he's got a huge problem with Hispanic men, with men in general, and sending Hillary out in her moo is not going to help with that. It's a reminder of what the Democratic Party did poorly for years and years that led to 2016.
To be fair, Hillary Clinton is a producer of the show Suffs, and so she.
I know, it's great, and I'm
to...
waiting. I'm eagerly waiting my glamorous moo phase. I'm not judging her for that, but she's a very polarizing figure to a lot of the country, and bringing her out and reminding people of that is not.
Well, not to the Tony audience.
Well, that's,
I mean, look, if this is what Biden has the celebrities in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And the Tony audience.
And Jeffrey Katzenberg. That's the other. Did you see the story in the New York Times? Biden's secret weapon is the guy who marketed animated movies in the 90s and the 2000s, and basically has had no commercial success since. So he started a service called Quibi. You may remember Quibi spent $2 billion in 3 months and then locked up shop. It was the streaming service for your iPhone, so that it was a streaming service, but it was portraits or whatever, portrait style. So the shows would fit your iPhone, and he and Meg Whitman lost $2 billion. I'm sorry, but that's maybe not a secret weapon.
But maybe it's his CGI skills or something that they've actually brought him on board for.
And I'm not even criticizing the fact that he has a great fundraiser raising money for him. It is this effort to come up with positive stories to explain why the campaign is not brain dead or dead in the water, that starts getting comic. They're not responsible for those stories. That is the press trying to find an angle to say, be not, sort of what the Pope said, right? Be not afraid. Be not afraid. And they got to be very afraid. I'm sorry. We have, as you say, we have 10 days, I believe now, till the debate. If there were 2 or 3 more Obama on stage, Giorgia Meloni on the battlefield, if there are 2 or 3 more events like this in the next 10 days, John, I can't even, the vocabulary eludes me.
62% of Americans think he's going to die in office when they were polled recently.
Yes.
I mean,
you don't have to worry about 2 or 3 more Giorgia Meloni moments happening in the next 10 days, because Biden released his schedule for this week.
Right.
Not doing anything.
No public appearances.
Well, I assume he's doing debate prep. I assume he's doing debate prep.
And fundraisers.
But even with debate prep, I mean, let me just show it, and let me just read what he's doing this week.
My favorite part of the commentary podcast.
Monday, June 17th, 2024. That's today. In the afternoon, the president will host a bilateral meeting with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg of NATO. Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. In the afternoon, the president will host an event at the White House marking the 12th anniversary of DACA, that's the Deferred Action Program, the Obama amnesty. And just side note, this is Continetti speaking. He's probably going to expand it tomorrow when he makes that announcement. Later, the president and the first lady will depart the White House en route to McLean, Virginia. That's, side note again, I'm really happy about that, because it means my afternoon commute will be totally screwed up. After that, the president and the first lady will participate in a campaign reception. Then the president and the first lady will depart McLean, Virginia, and return to the White House. We're Tuesday, June 18th. the president and the first lady will depart the White House en route to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Thursday, June 20th, the president will depart Rehoboth Beach en route to Camp David. So the president
They're
has
like seniors at Beach Week every week.
He has 2 events on his calendar for the rest of the week. One of them seems to be a public event, the DACA thing. One is a foreign policy event with Jens Stoltenberg, great person. And then there's a fundraiser, and then he's gone. And yeah, sure, he's having debate prep or whatever, but this is total seclusion, total removal. We don't want you to make any news going into this debate. We want to make sure you're tanned, rested, and ready, because we do not know what's going to happen, even with these rules that we have put in place and that the Trump campaign has agreed to make the debate as favorable to you as possible.
Okay.
The thing is, every time Trump, from here on out, and this has been the case for a long time, makes some statement, is caught conducting himself in some way that is obnoxious, chaotic, what we used to quaintly call unpresidential. And then there's the argument when every time he does this, we'll go, well, it's baked in. We've seen him doing this for 8 years, if not longer. But I mean, at least in the political arena. So you say, well, nothing's going to change. Whatever he does now, we know that's who he is. It's baked in. Biden's at a huge disadvantage here because it's still weird and alarming every time Biden does it. This is still fresh enough. This is a new thing to have a president doing that. It's not baked in. We are watching Biden's slip-ups in the process of possibly turning people's minds.
It's worse than that.
Of course it is.
Because it's not baked in because it's weird, but it's baked in because the impression that Biden has slipped is baked in. It's been more than a year since 2/3 of Democrats have said that Biden was too old to run for president. 2/3 of Democrats. It's been more than a year. So the idea that Biden's cognitive decline is real, that is baked in and is probably irreversible. But you're right that having a president be president and do things that keep reinforcing that is new.
But it's also not baked in the following way. There are people, great many of them, who, when you say, but Trump said this horrible thing, did this horrible thing, was a convict, and they go, yeah, I know, I don't care. No one says about Biden, yeah, I know he's losing his marbles, and I don't care, I want him anyway. They say, no, he's not. No, he's not. That's not happening. So that's what I mean by baked in.
Our good friend Michael Brendan Doherty on the Editor's podcast at National Review said something on Friday I thought was interesting, and I hadn't quite reckoned it this way, which is when asked why it was that the Trump conviction, which cost him a couple of points for a week, and now right now that whatever that was is over, and Trump is now back in the lead or whatever. If they are within the margin of error. Again, I'm going to say this again. Since January of 2023, they've been within a point of each other nationally, and nothing has changed. Like, it's nothing like this has ever happened before. That a race, first of all, you haven't had like two incumbents running against each other. You haven't had sort of pretty much a foregone conclusion about who the rival to the president was going to be. Nothing has changed. I mean, it's sort of it beggars belief. But what he said was that the lawfare aspect of the effort to get Trump, that too has become baked in. And when you think about it, that's really interesting, because I think the presumption, and not only are the presumption of the MSNBC bar and all of that, but even people like us, is people don't pay that much attention to politics. They don't know what's going. They're not dug deep in the weeds on who was what and 30 what Alvin Bragg was, who Alvin Bragg is, and why there's a problem with this indictment or whatever. They're not following anything. They just see headlines and this. And it may be deeper than that. There may be something deeper than that, which is, yeah, we get it. I know the Democrats are going after Trump in courtrooms. So they get a conviction, they don't get a conviction, whatever is the case. This is part of the Democratic strategy. It's how they're doing it. So, they got him and things go on. They're going on. It's not like, oh my God, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. We can't have a convicted felon as our president, because they've already come to presume that the effort to turn Donald Trump into a convicted felon is a partisan Democratic electoral strategy, and they are therefore able to write it down or make it sort of a part of the background noise. I would not have expected that to be the case, and I think Michael is onto something, and that means that you spend 8 years saying that Donald Trump is a crook. His tax returns are released, in contravention of everything that anybody ever knows. And guess what? He didn't do anything wrong or illegal, because he wasn't indicted on any charges relating to the illegal of his tax release. You impeach him twice. You go after him. You have 5, 6, 7 different legal cases thrown at him the minute that he loses the presidency. And people go, there's something hinky going on here.
I also think it's because there are tens of millions of Americans who have some connection to the legal system. Tens of millions of Americans who have been incarcerated or have some type of conviction, or even a larger population who are related to someone who's been involved in the judicial system. And that group of Americans, they probably look at the whole thing very cynically. And so it is kind of the Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Obama crowd who have a reflexive reaction to convicted felon Donald Trump. And say, oh God, whoa, that's because why? Because, as my spouse likes to point out, we follow the rules. We don't want a rule breaker in the White House. What we don't understand is half the country, they kind of like breaking the rules. They have broken the rules. They've been caught up in the problem before. They maybe even think that Trump's kind of FU attitude to the authorities is kind of cool. So this argument of convicted felon doesn't have any effect. And just point out, the most celebrated governor in America today, Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, announced this morning a massive amnesty for marijuana crimes in his state. Massive. Hundreds of thousands of people will be have their records cleared. And it's that type of, whatever you think about that particular policy, it just shows you how our legal system has become like a political plaything. Yeah. Like, what is the meaning? Okay, now it's the thing that we're pro-marijuana, as the Democratic Party's pro-marijuana, and we were pro-criminal justice reform, except for Trump with the 34 checks. Send him to prison because the jury found him of falsifying the business records to cover up his affair with
By the way,
Daniels. No one takes it seriously anymore.
You pointed out that the policy event this week, I assume the Stoltenberg thing is a policy event, something will be said about
foreign policy, right?
Right, okay.
So domestic policy
is an event
it's an amnesty, right? Another amnesty.
Event involving amnesty. The week I thought that Biden was on the verge of announcing a cancellation of amnesty.
He had his executive order last week, which doesn't seem to have had much effect on the border, by the way.
Yeah.
And then this week, it's actually the reverse. It's an amnesty, thus incentivizing illegal crossing, because if you stay here for 10 years and marry a legal resident of the United States, per this order, which may be announced tomorrow, okay, you're fine. You're in.
Look, polling showed 10 years ago that the American people were in sympathy with the Dreamers, right? Through no fault of their own, they're brought here as kids, or they're born here, whatever. They're brought here, and then they have they have no legal status, even though they're fundamentally Americans. They were raised in the United States, and 2/3 of Americans or something said they felt sympathetic toward it and would like something to happen, and so much so that Trump wanted to make a deal to come up with some process to legalize the Dreamers in 2017. Even Trump, the most anti-immigration president ever, had some meeting where he thought maybe they could come up with some compromise, right? But we're not in 2014 and we're not in 2017. The American people seem to have taken a very, very, very hard shift. And it's not just the American people, as this is now the entire West. The entire West. What is going on in France? What is going on in Germany? What is going on in the Netherlands? What is going on in Italy? What has been going on in a little bit in Great Britain, though it's taking an odd form of the country moving left, is this general sense that something got out of control and everybody was supposed to think that there were no national borders anymore, and that all wealthier nations had an obligation to take in people from less wealthy nations and provide them with a home and security and welfare benefits and all of that. And the populaces across democracies around the world are saying no. No. And what is Biden doing this way? I don't understand it. I keep looking and thinking the conversations that liberals are having in their liberal precincts have now completely slipped the bonds of practical reality. There was this amazing article written by the dean of students or the dean at Harvard with the astounding name of Dr. Bobo. His name is Bobo, appointed by like Bobo's in Paradise, saying basically that, if you're a professor at Harvard and you say anything that is injurious to the reputation of Harvard, we should get rid of you. You're not allowed to talk smack about Harvard. Now, how this guy was appointed by Claudine Gay, how he comes after the last 9 months to issuing a proclamation that it's okay for people to scream about Harvard's policies on the lawn of Harvard, but that a professor at Harvard can't say anything negative about Harvard. I was trying to think about the psychology of what goes on, and it's like, when we say that our ideas and our perspectives do not penetrate the worlds outside of the right, whereas the liberals' perspectives, we're consumed with what liberal perspectives are and where they go wrong and how we need to combat them and fight them and do all that. It's a smidgen of what we actually think. The walls that have come down in their brain about what ideas need, about the permeation of what actually is going on in the minds of ordinary people, they have no connection to it anymore. And maybe that's true in the Biden, White House, where somebody who was the organizer of the Students for Justice in Palestine at Georgetown University is a senior advisor on the Biden National Security Council. How did that happen? How did White House personnel allow that to happen? Because they're not allowed to think otherwise. It's perfectly okay to be a member of, maybe now, when 2021 it was, now you'd be, I don't know, it's a little too controversial. But I just think that the inestimable advantage this gives Trump and the Republicans, simply because one of the lines that I've proffered my entire adult career is that liberals speak liberal and do not understand conservative. And conservatives, although there are now many more conservatives of whom this is not true, conservatives are bilingual and liberals are monolingual. Conservatives speak liberal and conservative, and liberals only speak liberal. And from Reagan times onward, this has given us an extraordinary leg up on them, because we know what they're up to. We know what they're about. We know where their ideas did come from. We know what their ideas will lead to, and we can polemicize against them. And what do they say about us? We're fascists. We're baby killers. We're not. We're we want to keep women barefoot and pregnant in the 19th century. So they say this stuff that is, I think, minimally effective with a certain type of population, but it's not the real engagement in the war of ideas. And rather than the last 9 months opening them up to the idea that they better get a more interesting perspective, it's way worse. It's like they're getting worse, because Biden's having an event to celebrate the moment arguably that got Donald Trump elected, which is the moment that Obama said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to legalize millions of people, and I have no constitutional right to do so, and I'm doing it anyway. So when Trump said, all people in Washington do is play Calvin ball, they just write their own rules whenever they do it. So I'll be that too. I'll do it in my own way. How could they object?
But John, when you say that the moment now, maybe they're recognizing that there's some broader discomfort with their own ideas. Something I think somewhat noteworthy happened last week, which is after the night of pro-Hamas rallying here in New York at the Nova Music Festival Museum exhibit, some squad members up for re-election sort of came down with these social media messages renouncing the anti-Semitism suddenly in much more unequivocal terms than they had before. I think there's a recognition, at least when it comes to the pro-Hamas hordes, that the American public doesn't like that, and that is a true potential liability for them.
I just think it's harder to be able to describe something called the American public.
Yeah.
And it was hard to describe even in 2016, but now in 2024, I think it's almost impossible. Everything is fractured. Everything is niche. You have Biden, you have Hillary, you have Biden with his new ad on television. No wonder he's doing pretty well among seniors, because senior citizens are probably the only people who watch broadcast television or cable television anymore. Then you have Trump doing a TikTok in recent days with Jake Paul, the social media influencer turned wrestler slash UFC. He does different types of fighting, and Dave Portnoy, where they have like the champions belt, and Trump is challenging. It's total kayfabe Trump performance art. And then you have Hillary at the Tonys, being rapturously applauded. The culture is all over the place. And just briefly, I do want to talk about where Trump was over the weekend, because Trump visited Michigan, battleground state, and specifically Detroit, and went to a black church in Detroit, and was once again ramping up his outreach to black voters, in particular black male voters. And I thought it was a pretty successful event for Trump. It coincided with the new USA Today survey showing that black voters don't really like either candidate, and they're not as a bloc embracing Trump, but black voters are very reluctant to support Biden. And it's just a reminder that Trump doesn't need to win the black vote to become the president again. He just needs the level of black turnout to fall, certainly to levels where it was in 2016 or lower.
Yeah.
And he becomes president again. And one other aspect of the trip that I think was worth noting is Trump now has an economic message, which I think brilliantly reflects the new coalition behind the Republican Party. And that is his message of no tax on tips. And it's something that he launched when he visited Las Vegas and campaigned in Nevada 2 weeks ago. But he also brought that message to Detroit. And the way in which it appeals to what is now the base of the Republican Party, voters without college degrees, voters who work in the gig economy. They have 5 different things that they're hustling any given day, or they're waiters or waitresses, bartenders. They live on tips. I think it's a pretty effective economic message as well. And it's, by the way, it's a policy statement that is substantive, as opposed to what you hear from the Biden campaign, where you hear almost nothing about a second term. And instead we'll quite probably hear about another amnesty tomorrow from the White House, which, as you say, John, most Americans will look and go, what? About the border?
I think the tipping thing is, there are 2 things about what you say. The tipping thing is an act of genius, because until the Clinton administration, tips were effectively untaxed. And when Clinton decided that, when the Democratic general opinion, which is you should hoover up every cent that everybody makes and then give it back to them in better ways that they can be made more socially useful. There was no effort. The IRS made no effort, quite the opposite, at going after people who were receiving gratuities for their work. And have now, basically spent a couple of decades, on occasion, depending on the circumstance, using their punitive powers to go after people who are obviously, unless you're like the maitre d' at the French Laundry, right? If you're somebody who lives partially on tips, you are somebody who is working very hard with your hands, and you are getting rewarded for providing good service that is supposed to be a gift. It's designed morally to be a gift, as a thank you, not as part of your income. And so there's always been a kind of weird misunderstanding. And if the Democrats are the party of the working man, as they for 80 years they were thought to be, this was always a very strange thing to go after gig work people who were receiving tips. This, I think, is a perfect evolution of the switching places, the trading places that is going on in the party. The other thing about Michigan and going after the black vote is, and this is another reason to think that Trump has maybe a larger advantage going into November than we realize, which is that when you have a presidential campaign and you can play, you can do things that don't involve shoring up your own support and then gingerly going out and trying to expand it, but where you are so secure in what you have behind you and the platform that you're standing on, that you can start tweaking the other guy. Now, there was a moment in 2000 where the George W. Bush campaign, got overconfident and saw some poll numbers in California that led them to think that maybe they could go at California, and they started spending money in California. And then the DUI, Bush's secret DUI thing came in, and he almost lost, obviously, or, lost by 500,000 votes, and, almost lost in Florida, whatever you want to call it, in part because they took their eye on the ball, because they were overconfident about where they were. So it's possible to do this in the wrong way. However, clearly this is not the wrong way. Trump has a solid 230 electoral votes he's standing on the platform of. And so all he's doing is he's freaking Biden out. He's making Biden spend money places Biden would rather not spend money, like in the African-American community that he would like otherwise to take for granted. And the more that that's the case as we go on through the summer, and the more the Trump people seem to be doing interesting things in interesting places, I think the more and more anxious Democrats will be, and the more confident Republicans are going to be that he's playing a winning hand. Because, it's like if you're up at a poker table by $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, you're in a better position to bluff. And if you bluff, sometimes you bluff and then you pull an inside straight while you're bluffing. I mean, that's part of the game here. So I think that's something. Something else I want to talk to you about, of course, is our friend David Bahnsen and his book Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. This remarkable new argument about the God-given dignity of every person and how that is best expressed, or one of the ways in which it is best expressed, is through work, the productive labor that you do that both enhances your family's prospects, and provides goods and services to the world that it would not otherwise have. And work is too often seen as a necessary evil these days. People talk about it slightingly, or they think that work is just a way of getting to when you can go play video games at home, and that this is a total misunderstanding of what work does, how it dignifies you, how it provides you with a sense of purpose that isn't just the purpose that you have by being a person in a family, a person who goes to your church, a person who serves your community. All of these things are enhanced by having a positive attitude toward the work you do, and a belief that the work you do has a spiritual component that will make you a better and more productive person. So that's David Bahnsen's Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. You can get it today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever fine books are sold. And you can check out more at fulltimebook.com. Matt, you have a recommendation. Then I want, actually, let me do this in reverse.
Okay.
You talked about the Tonys, Hillary making her speech at the Tonys about SUFs and all of that. And I just wanted to provide a little consumer service for people. As it is summer, people will be coming to New York. You probably didn't watch the Tonys, but if you did watch the Tonys, something very interesting happened, which is that the PC shows lost. And a show that came out of nowhere, which was an adaptation of S.E. Hinton's novel, The Outsiders, which is famously a book about teenagers in 1960s Oklahoma in Tulsa, a kind of social war between the poor white kids and the preppies. Came out of nowhere, really, to win the Tony for Best Musical, whereas the creative awards for that category, that is the book, music, and lyrics, were won by a show called SUFs, the one that Hillary Clinton is one of the producers of, which is a sort of worshipful portrait of the suffragette movement. And Shana Taub, who is the Lin-Manuel Miranda of this show, wrote the book, the music, the lyrics, and stars in it. Shana Taub won the book, music, and lyrics, but The Outsiders won the Tony. This is a very interesting moment because the Tonys, like all of theater, have gone insanely woke over the last 5 or 6 years. So much so that if you watch the show, you may have noticed that there was no such thing as a white presenter who was not teamed with a black presenter. There were no non-black white. It was all, and the show that not only was SUFs a show that The Outsiders defeated, but so was Hell's Kitchen, which is a show about Alicia Keys, the autobiography of Alicia Keys, the person who sang New York and some other stuff that isn't very good. And I don't know. I haven't seen that, but I did see The Outsiders, which really isn't a very good show, though brilliantly staged. And it's just interesting because the people who actually vote for the Tonys using a secret ballot gave a big middle finger to PC, because The Outsiders is many, many things, but it is not PC. I mean, it is, it is sort of like, it's about nascent Trump voters, and you're on the side of the nascent Trump voters. It's 1967 kids who grew up to be Trump voters, and they just won the Tony for Best.
May I scrap my recommendation and instead just engage you for a moment on the matter of Broadway?
Yes, and you do next week.
Yeah, I'll do it later. I can save, I struggle to come up with recommendations. So I'm pocketing my recommendation for today and saving it for later in the week. Only to ask you this, which is, have you seen the play that did very well, Stereophonic?
I have seen Stereophonic.
Because and the reason I say that is, I learned about this play just recently, and as you know, I like to listen to music, and I began listening to the Stereophonic album, which is songs made for the play by a former member of the band Arcade Fire. And I have to say, the play, which is based on kind of the Fleetwood Mac recording sessions for the Rumors album,
Yeah.
and then the Arcade Fire musician Will Butler, right? He wrote an album basically, that they're arguing about in the play, and the album is perfect in my view. It's basically like a new Fleetwood Mac album emerged from Zeus's head, and you can listen to that through Spotify or Apple Music or any of your music services. So that is my recommend. I have not seen the play.
Yes.
In fact, I almost think the play will be a disappointment now.
Yeah.
I am so in love with the music, but that was my question to you.
So Stereophonic is one of the damnedest things I've ever seen, by which I mean that it's a 3.5-hour long play about a 14-month recording session. And it is Fleetwood Mac recording Rumors. And there are two couples, as was the case with Fleetwood Mac, who are coupling, uncoupling, consciously uncoupling, recoupling, fighting, yelling, and then the suffering studio techs who have to work with them as they will not finish this album and they move into year 2 of recording it. And it is very long, but it is about the act of the creation of a work of popular culture and a successful work, right? Because Rumors was one of the 2 or 3 best-selling albums up to that time and did turn Fleetwood Mac into this sort of, eternal legendary band. And it does better than any other piece of theater or movie making that I've ever seen make you feel as a person in the audience as though you are participating and experiencing the struggles, the difficulties, the pains, the moments of boredom, that in the making of this. It is a pretty remarkable accomplishment as a piece of theater. The thing that I want to recommend, which was nominated and was shut out, was nominated for Best Musical, and that I didn't want to see, but my son wanted to see it, so I went to TKTS, the half-price ticket booth, and I got tickets.
Hold on, so now we're on like the third recommendation of the morning.
Right, yes. No, but as long as we're doing this, because it's theater, but I mean, this is actually useful because people do come to New York to go see shows. There is a musical called Water for Elephants, which is about, based on a novel that was made into a really bad movie, which is about a circus in 1931. And a second-rate traveling circus in 1931, and an old man who is remembering his experiences being someone who essentially ran away with this circus. And I thought, oh my God, and it's going to be like Cirque du Soleil and blech. I hate Cirque du Soleil, and it's not going to be. And the first act of Water for Elephants is one of the most remarkable feats of theater that I have ever seen, because it combines classic choreography, circus stunts, pretty wonderful songs, very much folk-inflected songs, and a very powerful and imaginative way of depicting the life of this weird world of sort of like broken down show business behind the scenes stuff. The second act isn't as good, though it's not bad. But if you're coming to New York, if it's still running, also for those of you, for the 12 of you who would care about this, the star of Water for Elephants is an actor named Grant Gustin. Grant Gustin played The Flash on the TV show The Flash for 9 years, which was actually the best superhero show on television. And he has a world-class set of pipes. He has a genuinely huge breakthrough Broadway voice and is pretty stunning in the show altogether. So if you're coming to New York and you have the you could go see The Outsiders, which is worth seeing because the staging is staggering, but the show itself isn't very good, just as the novel isn't. The fact that everybody is forced to read it, though, it's only because it's 120 pages long. And
they like the title. People like the title.
And she was 17. Susie Hinton was 17 when it was
Wow.
published. S.E. Hinton, and so and she's but it's not good, but it's staged brilliantly. But Water for Elephants is the show to see if you want to see
And listen to Stereophonic.
and listen. And
Don't-
see,
don't
it's
forget
very hard to get a
mine.
ticket.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's very hard to get a ticket to Stereophonic.
But you can
By the
listen
way.
to the album.
But you can listen
don't
to
even
Will
need
Butler's
to-
album,
Yes.
which is it's like getting a new Fleetwood Mac album.
Yeah.
That is
It's a gift.
it's that yes, it is a gift. So there we have it. So Matt and I have now made multiple recommendations of a kind that he didn't even
Totally.
know he was going to be.
Well,
recommending.
once you began
yeah,
your accounting of what's happening in the world of theater, I realized I'll just save
Yeah.
my recommendation to another
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
but it's like it's enough already. But Broadway is saying it's enough already.
By the way,
Let's pick shows that we don't have to vote for in the privacy of our secret ballot because we're trying to show that we're woke.
and do you
we've had
remember
enough.
all those articles when the pandemic hit and theater stopped about will Broadway ever recover?
Yeah.
I don't know, looking at all the coverage of what's been going on, and it seems like it's recovering pretty well. There's certainly-
Broadway's recovered. Listen,
Exactly.
there were 38 or 40 shows this year, and
Yeah.
12 of them opened in the weeks before the Tony.
so that's a good
Awards.
sign. Yeah, and it's quality stuff.
I mean, it's
too.
a good
Yeah.
sign. Is there is good stuff. There is good stuff. Actually, there's also bad stuff, and there's. But anyway, it's an interesting cultural moment. So we will be back tomorrow for Abe, Matt, and Christine. I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.